Okay, I guess we're really going there then. On July 17th, the Sun in Cancer arrives in an opposition with Pluto, the Lord of the Underworld. And yes, you guessed it, this is one of the more difficult transits that I will be reporting on for you this week. This is kind of a difficult situation. The Sun in Cancer, as we know, deals with the past. We've been talking a lot about this because it's Cancer season, but also since the Cancer new moon just roughly 1 week ago today. So we already saw this aspect building in the new moon, and this is something that we've been working with. If you watch that video or even the Chiron retrograde video I did earlier this week, we're doing a lot of soul retrieval. We're doing a lot of reclaiming our story, rewriting our story, and this is a part of it. This might be one of the more difficult pegs in our little storyline that we're rewriting this week, because Pluto asks us to look at the shadow. Pluto asks us to look at the ugly things that we aren't the most comfortable with. And I say quote unquote ugly because it's all beautiful when we're able to do the full work of transmuting it in its full context. Hopefully, it's not always that way. Sometimes it is just ugly, But yeah, Sun opposite Pluto, we're doing some soul retrieval work. We're going to the past. We're reclaiming that piece of ourselves where innocence may have been lost. We know that Pluto has a lot to do with abduction, being a key player in the Persephone myth, where Persephone is this innocent little girl picking daisies. Her mom's over there. Everything's good. Life is good. And then bad boy Pluto takes her to the underworld. Many layers to that myth that I don't have the space to unpack right here. But there is this theme with Pluto about innocence being taken away or trauma. I'm reading actually the book right now, The Body Keeps the Score. And they're talking about how trauma often occurs where in one moment, things that you depended on, things that brought you joy are suddenly gone. And we know that Pluto transits can often correspond with periods of trauma or abuse or just your life being totally decimated and transformed. Not to say that some Pluto transits aren't good. I think I can look back on certain Pluto transits and say, yeah, that was pretty positive. But usually there is a very key element of difficulty because we have to do this heavy excavation process, which usually isn't nice to do unless you're a little bit of a masochist, which, hey, if you got Pluto prominent in your chart, all the power to you. Or Mars. So yeah, we can all, I think, relate. We've all had Pluto transits where the rug was swept out from under us, or where commonplace like elements in our lives, like keystone elements in our lives that we depended on and perhaps even defined ourselves with, were suddenly gone, and we're left to pick up the pieces and create a new story. So that's kind of what the Sun opposite Pluto is going to be highlighting for us, is that power dynamic where someone either had power over us. For example, maybe care was promised and they didn't uphold, they didn't deliver. They weren't able to give you the care that you required or needed. They fell short. Or maybe it was worse than that. Maybe there was like abuse of some kind going on. So this can really highlight where, we were the ones depending on someone else's care and it was not fulfilled in the way that it should have been or the way that we needed it to be. So this can be highlighting or reflecting that sort of power dynamic that is often experienced in those types of scenarios. This idea that I'm talking about soul retrieval is how we get our power back. Soul retrieval is tracing the steps back to that innocent being that you were at that time, the unsuspecting, maybe you weren't studying astrology, you didn't know it was coming, and going back to that phase and trying our best to impart radical compassion. That means having compassion for ourselves, the part of ourselves that didn't know any better at the time. And also, even in some cases, you might even be able to reframe the situation, lending compassion to the person who let you down. and in rare cases, even your abuser. This is deep work that I'm talking about. It doesn't happen with like a brief transit like this, but this kind of transit can reflect ourselves in that process, or kind of remind us of some of the work that we've done in that process. But having compassion, maybe that person was hurt too, or that person was abused, or that person's parents, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like, hurt people is what I'm trying to say. So anyways, the sun opposite Pluto can really highlight these power dynamics, and being able to get to a space of compassion can help us to, is very much related to getting to a space of understanding. And I really think that it's by having understanding that we're able to kind of take our power back and move forward. So yeah, empowerment, by acknowledging these sorts of scenarios and how complex they are. And yeah, so that's just one way to think about this sun opposite Pluto. And, how do you take your power back? You make different choices in the now. Radical support, radical nurturing for the people that you really care about. So yeah, even though we are having this sun trine Neptune where it's all about the invitation to open, this one is kind of another kind of offering where it's the offering to protect, radical protect. And it could be privacy too, like choosing who you share what with. So yeah, we have these kind of contradictory aspects that we can choose to tap into this week, depending on where you're at on your path. And yes, like I said, this is some heavier stuff that we're talking about here. So it's definitely going to be one of those emotional times. So definitely be gentle with yourself and find the soul family who you can trust to talk about your experiences with, whether that's your therapist or your best friend or whatever. But you don't want to be completely alone in your process if this aspect is taking you to your depths. So definitely reach out. And if you want to talk about it more, I'm always available for consults, which you can find on my website. So that's a little bit about sun opposite Pluto. And yeah, be gentle with yourself. And I hope you catch some of that Plutonian gold. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're looking for more astrology in your world, you can join me on Instagram, Twitter, or Patreon at AstroCatherine. You can also check out my website where you can book your astrology reading, and be sure to check out my roster of upcoming astrology courses.